Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to film my June wrap up, and if you couldn't tell from the title, it is kind of titled the Lunar Chronicles edition because I finished pretty much the whole series in June. There was one book that I read in June though that wasn't anything to do with the Lunar Chronicles, so I want to go ahead and talk about that book first so it doesn't get confusing. And that book was Untamed by A.G. Howard. Now this is a bind up of 3 novellas that go with the Splintered series that I read back in January and February. It's part of the Alice in Wonderland retelling that I loved. This was kind of like a, I guess you should say, wrap up of the series and what happened to a lot of the people after the series ended. And so I don't know why it took me so long to read this, because I wanted to know more about them, what happened. The first book in this follows Alyssa's mom and dad. It's after the events that happened in the Splintered series, but you get to see them go back a little bit and look at some of his memories, which are really cool because then you get to see it from his point of view. And then the second book is The Moth in the Mirror, and that is Morpheus seeing some of Jeb's memories. And I would say that while I enjoyed the book as a whole, that was probably my least favorite because I like Jeb and I love Morpheus, but I didn't see really how this story had any kind of point to it. But I have to say book 3 for me was definitely my favorite. It was the story in this book that really made it. It was everything that happened after the fact, touched base on Jeb and Alyssa's family and future, and then it touched base on her future with Morpheus and just some of the things that could have and would have happened after the Splintered series, and it was great. I did give this a 4.5 out of 5 because I did feel like the middle story of this book wasn't really something that needed to be in it, but I felt like the other 2 stories had so much substance and such a good kind of finality to it that it gave enough to compensate for that middle book. I really enjoyed this. I loved reading about the end, and I will say I haven't cried in a book in a long time, and towards the end of this I did cry as we lost someone, and then again I cried a little while later when a new beginning started. So it was really good the way that she ended this. I think A.G. Howard does amazing things with retellings, and I love Alice in Wonderland, so of course that probably didn't help any, but this was a great ending to a series that I really loved. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the Lunar Chronicles for a bit. I read Cinder back in January. I wasn't the biggest fan of it. Sci-fi is not really my thing, and so I kind of was not digging it that much, but everyone was telling me that if I just kept going with the series that I would love it and it would only get better from there, and they were right. So the first one, or I should say the next one in the series, is Scarlet by Marissa Meyer. The retelling of this is based off of Red Riding Hood, and I thought Marissa Meyer did an amazing job getting the key aspects in this. You meet Scarlet, who is this very headstrong, independent girl who's really had to kind of learn how to be independent while living with her grandma, and her grandma is missing. And so the story is her basically trying to find out what happened to her grandma. And I love this book so much. Like instantly from the beginning, I thought it was so much better than Cinder. Now, something I didn't expect for the rest of the series, and I don't know why I didn't, but I thought that each book for each individual character would be like their story, and you wouldn't really hear too much about Cinder. But the cool thing about this is Marissa Meyer does multi-perspective viewpoints in books that really help you to tie in everything. But you meet Wolf and Scarlet and you follow their story, but it really goes parallel with Cinder and Kai and everything that's happening in their world, and at the end they all kind of, some of them meet up and then they start another adventure which would start into the next book. I did give this book a 5 out of 5 star rating because I really enjoyed it. I loved seeing Wolf kind of, I just liked his personality, his character. I loved the depth of his heart, and I really liked who he was becoming towards the end. I really liked Scarlet. I loved how independent and just, you know, headstrong she was. And I did like the retelling aspects of this. Marissa Meyer does really well at that, if I haven't said that already. So this book I gave a 5 out of 5. The next book, I have to say, I'm not sure if I can call this my favorite because I feel like it's tied with Winter, but I almost feel like this would probably end up being my favorite. I'm not 100% sure on that because they're all so good, but it's Cress. In this series. Now in this book there's so much action. From the beginning of this book to all the way to the end, you get action like jam-packed in it. You meet Cress, who is a shell is what they call. She is someone from Luna who has no magical powers, so she can't do the manipulation or anything like that. She is stranded on a satellite where she is made to be like the hacker and like the intelligence for the queen. And this is a retelling of Rapunzel. And the cool thing about Cress, I think my favorite thing about her, is that she's so like smart when it comes to electronics and just technology, but she's also very timid and very just kind of like unsure of herself because she spent so much of her life alone in the satellite. The coolest part I liked about this was that you got to see more of Thorn. Because I forgot to mention it, you did meet Thorn in Scarlet, but Thorn is someone who she's kind of been following along with Cinder's story, and she technically like starts to have this love, like crush on him. And so this whole story is really their journey getting to where they need to be. Now, you did get a lot more of Cress and Thorn in this book than I feel like you got of Scarlet and Wolf, which was my only like complaint, I guess you could say, for Scarlet, was that you didn't get as much Scarlet and Wolf as I would have wanted. I wanted more of them, and in this book you got a lot more Cress and a lot more Thorn, which was nice. You also, towards the end, meet Jason and Winter, who are the main characters, I guess you could say, of Winter, which I thought was really neat because then it introduces them to that last book. So I did give this a 5 out of 5. I had no complaints about this book. I read it super quick, and I would gladly read this one again. So before we get to Winter, we kind of have to talk about the book I read in between, which is the kind of like side story, and it is Fairest. This is Queen Lavina's story. Now this book to me, while it was not a favorite and I didn't like it because I didn't like Lavina, I think that this is pretty crucial to this series. I think that if I would have not read this, if I would have skipped it, there would have been a lot of things I would have been questioning, but because I read it, and because I read it where they suggested you read it between Cress and Winter, there was so many things that I understood and that made sense to me that I really wouldn't have got had I not read it. Now, I know a lot of people think that when they read a story, like the backstory of a villain, that you're made to feel sympathy for them and you're supposed to feel bad for them and you're supposed to understand where they're coming from. I do not feel sympathy for her. I do not feel bad for her. However, I see where she was coming from, because the whole reason behind almost everything she's done is because she wants to be loved. She wants to be appreciated and just cared for, and she wants to have those feelings from people, and she never got that growing up as a kid. So I recommend reading this if you guys are reading this series and you haven't gotten to this yet. I definitely think that this is a staple for the series. I gave this a 4 out of 5 because even though I did like the book and it was a good information for the series, I don't like Lavina at all, and so I didn't feel like I could give it a full 5 out of 5 just because she's so awful. So the last, I would say, like main book of this series is Winter. First of all, I had to show you guys, you've probably seen this book a million times, but how pretty is this book? It is so gorgeous. This whole series is just one of my favorite, like, aesthetically pleasing sets that I have. So this book is huge. This is 824 pages. Took me not quite a week to read because it was so much, but this book had so much going on in it. In this book, their setting is on Luna, so basically everybody's on the moon, and they're trying to raise this rebellion, this revolution to overthrow Lavina so that the rightful queen can step up and take her spot. And so this whole book is really, each character, they're learning more about themselves, but they're also learning like where their role plays in this. And the one thing I would say that kind of made me on my edge of my seat a lot was that so often I was excited when people would reunite, and then in the next chapter they would get separated again. And so a lot of this was the group being separated off and on and having to deal with things that they hadn't expected. You get to meet a few people in this one that end up being really great characters, like side characters. I think Ma Kelsey is just, I love her, and there's just different people in this book that I feel like played a really crucial role, and I'm excited to have met them. I did give this book a 5 out of 5 because it gave me so much in the story that I wanted. I got to know Winter more, which was great. I loved knowing more about her. I got to know Jason more, which I have to say this, I may be the only person on the planet to say this, but I don't care for Jason. Like, I don't care that he's with Winter. I don't care that he loves her and that he's taking such good care of her. That's great, but you're a jerk to everybody else, and I just don't really like you that much. So he is my least favorite character of the main characters. You get to see more of Wolf and Scarlet in this book. You just get to see more of everybody, and I feel like the way that it got wrapped up was a really good ending to this, and I don't think that it really could have went any other way to where it would have been what we'd been working up to in all these books. So again, I did give this a 5 out of 5. The last book of this series, so this is Stars Above, my mastermind. This is a bind up of 9 short stories that all had to do with the Lunar Chronicles. There's one story in this that had nothing to do really with the Lunar Chronicles, and it was a story that was kind of around this same, like right before everything in this series started, and you see Cinder for like 2 seconds, but it's about a totally different set of people. And while it was nice, I didn't really feel like it was necessary, but I loved this book because it showed background of Wolf, it showed background of Cinder, of Jason and Winter, of Thorn, which I was excited for the Thorn story because I really felt like we got to know a little bit of like how he was when he was younger and the life he came from. And then the final story in this book, if you guys have not read this series or not read this book, oh my Lanta, like it was fantastic. Talk about a fairy tale ending. And I'm sure a lot of you know like what's expected at the end of this book, but it was not what I expected. Like there is a wedding, and I'm not going to say who, but when you think of that, after you've read this series, you automatically think of this one couple, and that's who I thought was getting married. But no, it's another one, and I was super excited because I love them. So I loved the ending of this book. It was great, and I think it ended probably the best way it could have. So I was really glad that Marissa Maya released this so that we kind of have that final closure with the group. I still think that there could be more books to go on with this series. I feel like she could continue this in a side series and have like the next step of adventures, or even their kids. Like if all the couples had kids, I think that would be cool to have that happen. I think that'd be great. But this was awesome. I gave it, I think, a 4 out of 5 because I liked most of the stories. I just didn't know if that one that didn't really have anything to do with our main characters was relevant, but I did like most of them, and the ending was just perfect. Okay guys, so overall I have to say that the Lunar Chronicles has become one of my favorite series so far of the year. I really enjoyed getting to know each character. I loved all the action, and even though the first book was so heavily talked about like the sci-fi element because of Cinder, I feel like that's not as big of a part through the rest of the series. So it's there, but it just wasn't as heavy for me, so I feel like I was still able to enjoy it. So even if you don't like sci-fi but you like fairy tale or retellings or fantasy, this is a series I would recommend. Overall, for all of the books, I say I'd have to give this series a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It really just was a great read, and if you have the time to just go through each one back to back to back, it's even better because then you know like what just happened and there's no need to like remember anything. I did have to go back through and kind of reference Cinder a few times because when I was reading Scarlet there were some things I couldn't remember. It's been 6 months, so but other than that, I really enjoyed this series and I was happy to have finally finished it so I can talk about it with people. Alright guys, so that's the end of my June wrap up, the Lunar Chronicles edition. If you guys have read the Lunar Chronicles, let me know down below what you thought. Which book is your favorite? Because I still can't decide. I think it's gonna have to be Cress, but it's a tie between Cress and Winter, I really think, because it's just, they're both great. They're both fantastic books. Also, let me know what you guys read this month or what you plan to read in July. I would love to hear that. Leave them down in the comments below. And until my next video, I will see you guys later.